Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Do you still remember the stars who once lit up the golden screens of Hollywood? In today's video, we revisit 15 legendary actors whose lives stretched across nearly a century and whose final chapters closed not with scandal or tragedy, but with the quiet inevitability of time itself. These are the icons who lived long enough to see the industry transform, the world change, and generations of audiences fall in love with their work. Their departures marked something deeper than the passing of individual artists. For many, it felt like watching the curtain fall on an entire era. Do you remember the first time you saw these legends on screen? Share your memories in the comments below. Today, we honor their final moments, their extraordinary journeys, and the legacies they left behind. This is the end of an era, but their stories will remain forever. Betty White. Her final day felt almost unreal to the millions who adored her. Just weeks before what would have been her 100th birthday, Betty White passed away quietly in her Los Angeles home. There was no dramatic incident, no long illness, no tragedy. Only the gentle fading of a life that had burned brightly for nearly a century. When news broke on the last day of December 2021, it felt as though the world had lost its grandmother, the woman whose laugh had comforted generations. The shock came not from the circumstances of her passing, but from the fact that even at 99, most people believed she would live forever. Only after her death did fans learn that Betty had spent her final days peacefully, surrounded by photos of loved ones and the memories of a career that redefined what it meant to be a television legend. Born in 1922, she became one of the first women to produce a sitcom, then later won America's heart in The Mary Tyler Moore Show and The Golden Girls. Her comedic timing, mischievous spirit, and ageless charm made her one of the most beloved entertainers in history. The reaction to her passing was immediate and overwhelming. Fans left flowers outside her home, Hollywood stars paid tribute across social media, and television networks replayed her greatest moments. What echoed the loudest, however, was a simple truth. Betty White made people feel joy. Even in her final hours, she remained a symbol of warmth and resilience. Now, let us move to another icon whose departure also marked the end of an era. His final moments unfolded far from the cameras, far from the red carpets, and far from the world that once hailed him as the ultimate symbol of masculine elegance. In the quiet, early hours of a Bahamian morning in October 2020, Sean Connery slipped away in his sleep. There were no alarms, no desperate emergencies, only a peaceful silence as the first James Bond took his final bow. To millions around the globe, the news arrived like a cold shock. Even at 90, Connery had seemed larger than life, untouchable, indestructible, eternal. But behind the scenes, his health had been declining for years. His wife Micheline later revealed that he had been struggling with age-related dementia, a slow and painful erosion of the sharp wit and magnetic presence that had defined him. And yet, in his final days, he remained surrounded by the warmth of family and the gentle rhythm of island life. As he drifted into his last sleep, it felt, according to those closest to him, like a man finding peace after decades in the spotlight. For the world, however, it felt like the end of an era. Born in 1930, Connery rose from working-class Scotland to become the definitive James Bond, starring in classics like Dr. No, Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love. His charisma redefined the modern action hero, and his later performances in films like The Untouchables and The Hunt for Red October proved that he was far more than a one-role wonder. Few actors have ever carried such authority on screen. When his death was announced, tributes poured in from every corner of the world.
Daniel Craig saluted him as one of the true greats. Fans gathered outside old Bond film locations. Film critics wrote long essays about the magnitude of his legacy. In that single moment, a collective realization settled in. Sean Connery was not just another actor, he was a pillar of cinematic history.
When Kirk Douglas passed away in February 2020, the world lost not merely an actor, but the last surviving titan of Hollywood's golden age. At 103 years old, his final moments were quiet, dignified, and profoundly symbolic. He died at home, surrounded by family, with no dramatic decline or sudden catastrophe. Simply the natural closing of a life that had stretched across more than a century. For many fans, it felt surreal. Kirk Douglas had been such an immovable force, such a fierce presence, that death itself seemed like the only opponent capable of stopping him. His journey toward that peaceful end was a stark contrast to the fire and intensity that defined his on-screen persona. Born Isur Danielovich in 1916, he rose from poverty, worked odd jobs, and clawed his way into the film industry with sheer determination. His breakout roles in Champion, Lust for Life, and especially Spartacus turned him into an icon of masculine resilience. His cleft chin, his burning stare, his uncompromising performances, they became symbols of an era when heroes were forged, not manufactured. Yet the world beyond the screen reacted to his death with a depth of emotion reserved only for the greats. His son Michael Douglas announced the news with a statement that echoed across Hollywood. To the world, he was a legend, but to me and my brothers, he was simply Dad. Actors, directors, and film historians alike paid tribute to the man who had helped end the Hollywood blacklist, who had fought for artistic integrity, and who remained active in philanthropy well into his late years. Even in his final decades, Douglas continued to inspire. Surviving a severe stroke in 1996, he relearned how to speak and went on to publish several books, proving yet again that resilience was woven into his very being. And when he passed away, the emotion was universal. Not just sadness, but awe. A century-long chapter of cinema had finally closed. Olivia de Havilland unfolded in a quiet Parisian neighborhood, far from the roaring sound stages where she once became one of Hollywood's most beloved leading ladies. On a warm July morning in 2020, Olivia de Havilland passed away peacefully in her sleep at the astonishing age of 104. There was no illness gripping her, no dramatic decline, only a graceful farewell from a woman whose life had already become the stuff of legend. For many cinephiles, it felt like the last petal falling from the golden age of Hollywood. Born in 1916, Olivia rose to prominence at a time when studios ruled the world and stars were molded like diamonds. Her role as Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind turned her into an icon. But her career went far beyond that. She fought for artistic freedom, challenged the studio system in court, and won a landmark decision that forever changed the rights of actors. Her performances in The Heiress, To Each His Own, and The Snake Pit earned her critical acclaim and 2 Academy Awards, cementing her place among the greatest actresses in film history. Her death sent a wave of emotion through both the film industry and the global audience who grew up admiring her grace. Tributes poured from directors, scholars, actors, and longtime fans who recognized that she wasn't just a performer. She was a symbol of strength, elegance, and Hollywood history. Many wrote that Olivia had been the last remaining thread connecting the modern era to the very birth of cinematic storytelling. In France, neighbors placed flowers outside her residence. Across the world, classic movie theaters played her films in tribute. And for a moment, time seemed to pause, allowing people to reflect on what it meant to lose the final leading lady of a bygone era. Angela Lansbury, In October 2022, the world awoke to the news that Angela Lansbury, one of the most enduring and beloved figures in entertainment, had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was just 5 days shy of her 97th birthday. For countless fans across generations, her departure felt like losing a guiding light, a warm presence who had quietly become part of their lives through film, theater, and especially television. There was no tragedy in her final moments, only a gentle fading of life, the kind of ending that seemed to match her dignified spirit. Born in 1925, Angela's rise to stardom began early. She earned Oscar nominations for her first 2 films, Gaslight and The Picture of Dorian Gray, proving almost instantly that she was a rare talent. But her legacy expanded far beyond the silver screen. On Broadway, she became a titan with her unforgettable performance in Mame. And on television, she achieved immortality as Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote, a role that made her a household name for more than a decade. Her passing triggered an immediate outpouring of tributes from actors, writers, directors, and fans who grew up with her calm intelligence and compassionate storytelling. She was remembered as a consummate professional, a generous colleague, and a woman who carried herself with humility despite being one of the most decorated performers of her generation. Many expressed a deep personal connection, as though Angela had been part of their own family. Even in her final years, she remained active, lending her voice and wisdom to new projects. She continued working long after most stars retired, driven not by fame, but by passion. When she finally left this world, Hollywood dimmed its lights, not in mourning alone, but in gratitude for a lifetime of artistry. Max von Sydow passed away in March 2020. The silence that followed felt strangely fitting for a man whose presence on screen had always been powerful, solemn, and deeply human. He died at 90, peacefully, with no dramatic medical emergency and no public battle for survival. Instead, he slipped away as quietly as a closing curtain, his final moment mirroring the contemplative, almost spiritual aura he carried throughout his long career. For many cinephiles, it was not just the loss of an actor, but the fading of a voice that had shaped the soul of world cinema. Born in 1929 in Sweden, von Sydow became internationally known through his collaborations with director Ingmar Bergman. His haunting portrayal in The Seventh Seal, where he played chess with death itself, became one of the most iconic images in film history. Over the decades, he transcended every boundary, moving from European art house cinema to Hollywood epics, from The Exorcist to Star Wars, from Game of Thrones to Minority Report. His range was vast, his depth unrivaled. His death triggered tributes from directors, actors, and film historians around the globe. Many described him as a bridge between cinematic eras, a man who could convey profound emotion with a single look. Others admired him as a gentle soul, humble despite being one of the most respected actors alive. Fans revisited his most memorable scenes, noting with awe how he could shift from terrifying to tender, from philosophical to fiercely human. In France, where he spent his final years, quiet memorials appeared outside local cinemas. Film lovers lit candles and placed photos of him, standing tall, eyes deep with quiet sorrow, like a man carrying centuries of stories. The emotional response revealed a truth that transcended borders. Max von Sydow had not merely performed roles, he had embodied the very essence of storytelling.
The news of Christopher Plummer's death in February 2021 came as a shock. Not because he was young, but because he had remained so active, so brilliantly present in the world of cinema until his final days. At 91, he passed away due to complications from an age-related fall at his home in Connecticut. There was no prolonged illness, no drawn-out public struggle, only a sudden, heartbreaking turn that reminded the world how fragile even the greatest among us can be. His wife, Elaine Taylor, was by his side in those final moments, bringing a quiet tenderness to a loss that millions would soon feel. Born in 1929 in Canada, Plummer built one of the longest and most respected careers in film history. His role as Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music made him a global icon, yet he spent decades redefining himself with complex, layered performances. From The Insider to Beginners, where he won an Academy Award at 82, he proved again and again that age could never diminish talent. In fact, his artistry only deepened with time. When he died, tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. Co-stars remembered him as charming, mischievous, endlessly curious, a man who approached every role with precision and elegance. Directors praised his discipline, calling him an actor who never settled for the obvious choice. Fans gathered online to share memories of his voice, his eyes, the quiet authority he carried into every scene. His final years were filled with renewed acclaim. Even in his 80s, Plummer delivered performances that actors half his age could only dream of. This refusal to fade, this determination to keep growing, made his sudden passing feel even more poignant. It was as though cinema had lost not just a legend, but a living reminder that creativity has no expiration date.
Sidney Poitier. On a quiet January morning in 2022, the world awoke to a loss that felt far larger than a single life. Sidney Poitier, the first black actor to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, had passed away at 94. The official cause was listed as natural causes tied to heart failure and age-related complications, an ending that came gently, yet carried with it the weight of an entire era of civil rights, artistic revolution, and cultural change. His death did not come with shock or tragedy. Instead, it arrived with solemnity, as though history itself were closing a chapter. Born in 1927 in Miami and raised in the Bahamas, Poitier broke through barriers that once seemed immovable. His performances in films like Lilies of the Field, In the Heat of the Night, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and To Sir with Love did more than entertain. They challenged audiences, confronted prejudice, and reshaped Hollywood forever. His calm strength, moral clarity, and piercing eyes became symbols of dignity at a time when such representation was desperately needed. When news of his passing spread, tributes poured in from global leaders, actors, activists, and ordinary viewers who felt personally inspired by him. Barack Obama recalled how Poitier opened doors for a generation. Denzel Washington said, "Before me, there was Sidney." Countless actors echoed the same sentiment. Poitier wasn't just a performer, he was a pathfinder. His family described his final days as peaceful, spent with loved ones, surrounded by the comfort he had cultivated over a lifetime. For a man who had shaped culture from the inside out, there was something poetic about such a gentle departure. It reflected the very essence of Poitier's presence, powerful, grounded, unwavering.
Cloris Leachman. When Cloris Leachman passed away in January 2021 at the age of 94, the world lost not just an actress, but one of the most versatile performers ever to grace stage and screen. Her final moments came quietly at her home in Encinitas, California, where she succumbed to a stroke brought on by age-related factors. Though she had recently tested positive for a mild case of COVID, officials later confirmed that her actual cause of death remained natural causes tied to age. Her departure felt like the end of a chapter in American comedy and drama alike, a reminder that even the brightest, funniest voices eventually fade into silence. Born in 1926, Leachman's career stretched over 7 extraordinary decades. She won an Academy Award for The Last Picture Show, earned 8 Primetime Emmys, and became a beloved comedic force on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and its spin-off, Phyllis. Her ability to shift from heartbreaking vulnerability to absurd humor made her irreplaceable. Audiences adored her, directors trusted her, and fellow actors admired her fearlessness. She never stopped working, even into her 90s, proving that creativity could remain boundless regardless of age. The reaction to her passing was immediate and heartfelt. Hollywood stars shared stories of her infectious humor. Fans posted clips of her most unforgettable moments, from dancing with reckless glee on Dancing with the Stars to delivering devastating lines in her dramatic roles. Her family remembered her as a woman who lived boldly, laughed loudly, and loved fiercely. That mixture of strength and mischief made her a rarity, a performer who felt both legendary and deeply human. What struck many people was how seamlessly she connected to every generation. Whether you first encountered her in Mel Brooks comedies, on television, in indie dramas, or in later life appearances, Cloris Leachman had a way of imprinting herself onto your memory. Her passing was peaceful, but the void she left behind felt immense.
In June 2020, the entertainment world lost one of its foundational pillars when Carl Reiner passed away at the age of 98. He died peacefully at his Beverly Hills home, surrounded by family, closing his eyes for the final time after a life defined by laughter, storytelling, and innovation. There was no tragedy in his departure, only the soft, inevitable ending of a remarkable journey that helped shape American comedy for nearly a century. And yet, for countless fans and fellow performers, the loss felt unexpectedly sharp, as though the very heartbeat of classic comedy had dimmed. Born in 1922, Carl Reiner changed the landscape of entertainment in ways few artists ever have. He created The Dick Van Dyke Show, a series that redefined sitcoms and became a blueprint for generations of television writers. As an actor, he starred in Your Show of Shows, one of the great comedy workshops of the 20th century. As a director, he delivered hits like The Jerk, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, and Oh God, showcasing his unmatched instinct for timing and character. His collaborations with Mel Brooks, especially the beloved 2,000-Year-Old Man sketches, became part of comedy history. At the time of his death, tributes flooded in from comedians, actors, writers, and fans around the world. Mel Brooks, his closest friend for more than 70 years, wrote that he had lost his best friend and the man who made him laugh harder than anyone else alive. Younger generations, from Steve Martin to countless modern comedians, credited Reiner with teaching them how to tell stories that were both funny and deeply human. Even those who had never met him felt the loss as though they had known him personally. His final years were filled with warmth and routine. He remained active on social media, continued writing, and regularly watched movies with Brooks. It was a gentle closing chapter, fitting for a man who spent his life bringing comfort and joy to others. When he passed away, it wasn't just the departure of an individual, it was the fading of a golden thread woven into the fabric of American entertainment.
Cicely Tyson passed away on January 28, 2021. The world felt a sudden ache, a heavy, unexpected silence. She was 96 years old, and her death was attributed to natural causes, yet the timing carried an uncanny poignancy. Only 2 days earlier, she had released her memoir, a powerful reflection on her life, struggles, and triumphs. It was as if she had waited to tell her story in her own voice, on her own terms, before taking her final breath. The moment her passing was announced, it felt as though a light that had guided generations had finally dimmed. Born in 1924, Cicely Tyson became one of the most influential actresses in American history. She refused roles that demeaned or stereotyped Black women, insisting on dignity, strength, and authenticity. Her groundbreaking performances in Sounder, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, and Roots changed not just the industry, but the cultural consciousness of the nation. She carried herself like a warrior, elegant, unshakable, and deeply human. Every character she played radiated purpose. The reaction to her death was immediate and profound. Leaders, artists, and fans around the world shared their grief. Oprah Winfrey called her a queen. Viola Davis said she felt devastated. Former President Barack Obama honored her for helping us see the dignity of every human life. Younger actresses spoke openly about how Tyson opened doors they once believed were permanently closed. She was not just an actress, she was a symbol of perseverance, an architect of representation, a voice for generations who had been silenced. Her final days were peaceful, spent in reflection and surrounded by the love of those who had walked beside her. But what she left behind was far from quiet. Her legacy continues to echo through every film, every performance, every artist she inspired. Cicely Tyson's life was a testament to resilience, and her passing marked the end of a chapter in American storytelling. Hal Holbrook. Hal Holbrook's final moments came on a cold winter night in late January 2021. At 95 years old, he passed away quietly at his home in Beverly Hills, with no dramatic decline and no crisis, simply the stillness that comes with age. The news emerged days later, and though his death was attributed to natural causes, the emotional weight of his departure struck a deep chord. For decades, he had been a commanding figure in American theater and film, a man whose voice carried the authority of history itself. His passing felt like another thread of cultural memory slipping away. Born in 1925, Holbrook achieved something few actors ever accomplish. He built a legacy around a single character without ever being confined by it. His one-man show, Mark Twain Tonight, which he performed for over 60 years, became one of the most celebrated theatrical achievements in American history. Yet even beyond Twain, he carved a stunning screen career. He delivered a chilling performance in All the President's Men, brought quiet power to Into the Wild, and appeared in television dramas with a gravity that made every line felt carved in stone. What made Holbrook unforgettable was his precision, his deep understanding of character, his ability to convey layers of meaning through the smallest gesture, the slightest breath. Students of acting revered him. Directors trusted him. Audiences felt they were in the presence of someone who transcended performance. When his passing was announced, tributes poured in from all generations. Younger actors called him a master of the craft. Veteran performers described him as a mentor. Critics noted that his career had spanned 3 eras of Hollywood, yet he never grew stale or predictable. His life was a study in endurance, discipline, and artistic evolution. In his final years, Holbrook remained reflective, thoughtful, and quietly engaged with the world. He retired from performing Mark Twain only in 2017, at 92. Even his farewell to the stage became a kind of poetic gesture, as though he understood that every artist must choose their final bow. When Norman Lloyd passed away in May 2021 at the age of 106, it felt as though the last living witness to Hollywood's entire history had finally taken his leave. His death came peacefully at his home in Los Angeles. No struggle, no sudden emergency, only the natural conclusion of an exceptionally long and extraordinary life. News outlets described his passing as the end of an era, and for once, the phrase was not an exaggeration. Lloyd had lived through every milestone of cinema, from silent films to streaming platforms. Born in 1914, Norman Lloyd didn't just participate in Hollywood history, he helped write it. He began his career working with Orson Welles and the legendary Mercury Theater, later appearing in Alfred Hitchcock's Saboteur and Spellbound. Hitchcock admired him so much that he recruited him as a producer and director on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Over the years, Lloyd acted, directed, and produced with a grace that defied time. Even in his 90s, he continued to accept roles, famously appearing in the film Trainwreck at age 100. The scope of his career is almost impossible to comprehend. He worked with Charlie Chaplin, John Houseman, Jean Renoir, Elia Kazan, Robin Williams, Judd Apatow. The list feels endless. Few performers have ever bridged so many eras or left their fingerprints on so many forms of entertainment. His colleagues described him as sharp, witty, endlessly curious, and astonishingly youthful, even as the decades stacked one upon another. When his death was announced, tributes poured in from all corners of the industry. Directors marveled at his professionalism. Actors spoke with awe about sharing scenes with someone who had known the greatest artists of the 20th century. Film historians wrote that his passing severed a final living connection to Hollywood's earliest chapters. It was not simply the loss of an actor, but the loss of a storyteller who carried nearly a century of memories. Louis Gossett Jr. When Louis Gossett Jr. passed away in March 2024 at the age of 87, the world felt the weight of losing not just a performer, but a pioneer. His death, attributed to natural causes, came quietly in Santa Monica. There was no drawn-out illness, no dramatic final struggle, just a peaceful conclusion to a life defined by resilience, artistry, and groundbreaking achievement. Yet the moment the news was released, it sent ripples through Hollywood. This was the man who had broken barriers, challenged stereotypes, and carved out a space for future generations of Black actors to thrive. Born in 1936 in Brooklyn, Gossett displayed talent from a young age. He earned acclaim on Broadway early in his career and moved effortlessly into film and television. But everything changed in 1982 when he delivered a forceful, unforgettable performance as Gunnery Sergeant Emil Foley in An Officer and a Gentleman. The role won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him the first Black actor to win in that category. His presence, explosive, commanding, and deeply emotional, redefined what supporting roles could achieve. Gossett continued to build a diverse career, from the hit miniseries Roots to television dramas, action films, and character roles that showcased his versatility. He brought gravitas to every performance, whether playing warriors, mentors, villains, or wounded men. What made him special was his ability to inject humanity into characters who might otherwise seem harsh or unapproachable. The reaction to his passing was immediate and heartfelt. Actors from every generation expressed grief, gratitude, and admiration. Colleagues called him a mentor. Younger stars described him as a blueprint for perseverance. Directors praised his discipline and emotional depth. Fans shared memories of the first time his intensity startled them, the first time a single scene of his left them breathless. In his final years, Gossett remained passionate about advocacy, speaking openly about racism, inequality, and the need for opportunities for Black artists. Even as his health declined, he continued to inspire, quietly, consistently, powerfully. Harry Belafonte. Harry Belafonte's passing on April 25, 2023, marked the end of one of the most remarkable lives of the 20th century. At 96 years old, he died of age-related heart failure at his home in Manhattan. There was no sensational final moment, only a peaceful farewell surrounded by loved ones. Yet the world felt the loss immediately and profoundly. Belafonte was more than a performer. He was a cultural force, a voice for justice, and a symbol of artistic courage. His death signaled the closing of a chapter in American music, cinema, and activism. Born in 1927 to Caribbean parents, Belafonte rose from poverty to become the king of Calypso, transforming global music with his groundbreaking album Calypso, the first LP to sell over 1 million copies. Songs like Day-O and Jamaica Farewell became part of cultural history, instantly recognizable across generations. But Belafonte refused to be just an entertainer. He shattered racial barriers in Hollywood, starring in films like Carmen Jones and Odds Against Tomorrow, and later producing powerful social dramas that challenged the norms of the era. His activism was equally iconic. A close friend of Martin Luther King Jr., Belafonte funded civil rights campaigns, bailed activists out of jail, and used his fame to demand justice long before it was safe or popular to do so. He stood against apartheid, advocated for humanitarian causes worldwide, and never softened his convictions, even when it cost him professionally. His voice, calm, fierce, and unshakable, became a moral anchor for countless movements. When he passed, tributes poured in from presidents, world leaders, musicians, actors, and millions of fans. Barack Obama celebrated him as a giant. Spike Lee honored his unrelenting activism. Younger artists spoke of him as a blueprint for using art as a weapon for change. Even those who never met him felt the weight of his influence.
In the end, Harry Belafonte left behind a legacy that stretched far beyond entertainment. He showed the world that art could be a vehicle for truth, that courage could be melodic, and that one person's voice could shift the tide of history.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we look back on these 15 extraordinary lives, we are reminded that even the brightest stars eventually fade, but their light never truly disappears. Each of these legendary actors left behind a legacy built not only on talent, but on decades of passion, resilience, and an unwavering dedication to their craft. Their final moments were quiet, gentle, and dignified, yet their impact remains thunderous. Through their films, their voices, and their stories, they continue to shape our memories and our understanding of cinema itself. Though their lives came to an end through the natural passage of time, the eras they defined, the characters they embodied, and the emotions they stirred will live on. These stars may be gone, but their presence endures in every frame they left behind. Which of these legends touched your heart the most? And are there other icons whose final chapters you remember? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Gone But Iconic for more stories like this.